live on YouTube, live from the OEIS show in Las Vegas, and I have a
Come on. Okay, good.
wonderful headache.
We are a go.
Hi, everyone. We are live at OEIS in Las Vegas, Nevada at the 11th annual scientific meeting. We're going to get our live show underway. OEIS stands for Outpatient Endovascular and Interventional Society. So this is a society made up of all of the office-based clinics that are treating peripheral artery disease, also chronic venous insufficiency, and quite a few other things, mainly in the peripherals. And so we're going to talk about that.
And under the microscope now, big time. So it should
Big
be
time.
that's an we've got a lot to talk about. This is gonna be a great show.
We do. I mean, there's some serious discussions about, the New York Times article that came out and the direction that they're going to go to try and maintain their practices. But because of that, there and just overall the payment schedule over on the national level going down for doctors, and then the insurance companies now withdrawing, denying claims.
Yeah.
I just
big
was
deal.
I don't know specifics, so you'll have to clarify, but there was this one doctor out of Vanderbilt who was saying that he does mostly veins, and now United Healthcare has come in and cracked down and said that you need to do some sort of measurement, that he said no doctor does this one measurement, whatever it was. I'm not as much of a vein person. And he said they're requiring that now, that it has to meet a certain measurement on some standard or whatever that no one ever does. And he was like, I don't even understand why they're doing it. I've been doing this for 70 years.
Yeah, the reason why they're cracking down on it is because everybody and their brother's doing it, and it's fairly it reimburses well. Again, we've had I know we got a minute before we go live on the show. We've had this conversation before. CMS and insurance companies made we'll talk about this, but they made the playbook, and people are using the playbook and probably overusing it, but it's not like they're doing anything illegal, and now they're trying to walk it back significantly.
Yeah, and I think that they're over, and there's only a handful of doctors that are doing this. I mean, it's the exception to the rule, but there are always a few bad seeds, and
Oop,
they
10
should
seconds.
keep in mind.
I can't wait to hear your totally ad lib intro.
Oh shoot.
This is 860 AM.
I don't know
The
about
Answer.
this.
Sponsored by The Way to My Heart Incorporated.
Welcome to the Heart of Innovation. 60 minutes that could save life and limb, with new breakthrough ideas and innovation changing the healthcare landscape. Brought to you by patient advocacy group thewaytomyheart.org in partnership with Abbott. Here are your hosts for the Heart of Innovation, Emmy award-winning journalist and founder of The Way to My Heart, Kim McNicholas, and interventional cardiologist and founder of the Save My Piggies Health Education Series, Dr. John Phillips.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm actually live at the OEIS show in Las Vegas, Nevada. I've been here for a few days. OEIS is the Outpatient Endovascular and Interventional Society, and this is their 11th annual event. It's their scientific meetings where doctors gather to learn what's new and what's next in treating any sort of arterial or venous issue, particularly peripheral artery disease, which is those blocked arteries and mainly the leg arteries. So many discussions happening around the crackdown on reimbursement for some of the procedures to open up the arteries, in insurance company backlash. I mean, there's just so much, I think, John, that we have to discuss. These are the office-based labs. So you have the hospitals, and then you have the office-based labs, the clinics, that still can open up arteries in their own little office space versus in a hospital. That's who we're talking to. That's who I'm surrounding myself with this week in Las Vegas. So lots going on. I have a booth for the first time. So I'm kind of excited. OEIS actually announced that they are endorsing our free walking program. It's a text-based walking program that democratizes access to walking support. Walking is the best medicine for patients with PAD because you can grow natural bypasses with every step you take. And so we are offering the program to all of the doctors for free. And this SVS, the Society for Vascular Surgery Foundation, actually came in and they donated 2,000 step count watches, fitness watches, to give to the doctors, to give to their patients in need, for everybody who signs up for the program. So really excited about that. Had about 20 doctors that have come over to the booth in the last day or so to sign up. So it's been pretty busy.
It definitely, well, number one, hello, Kim. How are you? I'm super stoked that you're out in Vegas. That's an interesting meeting of the minds, I imagine, because like you said, there's a lot to talk about. I do not have an outpatient lab. I work in a hospital. All my cases and procedures are done in the hospital, but we definitely know that the outpatient labs, whether right or wrong, are under the microscope for a number of reasons.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to kind of discuss. I'd love to hear kind of what you're hearing. I can or my 2 cents in, and literally it's 2 cents because I don't have one, but I've heard, you hear things, and you often have to ask yourself what percentage of that what you're hearing is truth and what isn't, and third hand comments and stuff. So it's pretty interesting. And then I'd like to also at some point too today share a really heartbreaking story of a patient that I saw for the first time and as a second opinion, because it just
I
breaks your
actually would
heart.
love to kick off with that because I think it's a great way to remind everyone that this is about the patients, that there are patients that are out there suffering. And we got even a note as we were just starting the show from Douglas, a patient who's watching right now, and he says his patients were the ones stuck in the middle between all of this insanity, between everyone out there and all the animosity that's happening between the hospitals and these office-based labs, and everyone's fighting over these patients. But it's really taking away and at the expense of the patients, and they're suffering in the meantime. So I really would love to kick off the show with your story to just bring everyone back to reality and what this is all about.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? My video
Yep.
internet seems a little bit unstable, so I'm good. Okay. And
You're good.
Kim,
You
give me
might want
this.
to just turn off the video for a moment and
Yeah, let's
have
just
your
do
audio.
that. So, yeah, so just audio now. I saw a patient in our acute kind of urgent limb center above the cath labs on Thursday. It was as a second opinion. So this gentleman was in a nursing facility. He's in his late 50s, and he's in a nursing facility because he was having issues walking and rehabbing after a recent hospital discharge. So the nurse practitioner that works in this facility used to work for us, and so she saw his legs and said, "You probably need to get evaluated by my team or former team." So I came in and I was called to see the patient after my other nurse practitioner saw him, and his wife was with him as well. So I have never encountered this before, but his legs were so ischemic, and he's African American. And the only reason I mention that is because we've obviously been doing a lot with, you have, and I've been kind of riding your coattails, but you've been doing a lot with the African American population. And we had that at one point during the seminar that we had. It was kind of the African American foot, right? So their skin color's darker. It's sometimes more difficult to assess lack of blood flow because I'm white as a ghost, and if my hand goes white, you would know. But it's harder for African Americans. So anyway, when I looked at his legs from the knees down, both of them were basically dead. So now this gentleman, I knew in my head that I ultimately was going to be admitting him to our hospital for bilateral, so both right and left amputations above the knee. This gentleman walked into a hospital in March, I believe, and now he will be leaving our hospital with no legs. In fact, we later found out that he was becoming septic from this because he couldn't feel them. And it broke my heart on a number of levels. First of all, because all the work that you're trying to do, but yet we still missed out on this guy. And he's so young that he's young. Hopefully he can, get the bilateral prosthesis that he needs and walk again. But he took it like a champ, to be honest with you, because I think he kind of knew deep down that this was coming. But man, and the sad thing too was his wife said, I feel like if we would have gotten to maybe somebody different, this would be a different outcome. And I said, you're right, it might have been. I don't know,
Exactly.
but I just
Exactly.
I was
I mean,
I was almost not that I was crying, but I was just like my heart was crying. Seriously, I was so ticked off.
oh, I can absolutely imagine. I mean, God, how devastating. I want to have a grander conversation about this. So I think we should just head to break now, and then let's come back and revisit this conversation because it's a good way to start off, and it's a good reminder, for people to always get a second opinion, and the fact that they have to really stay on top of this. So stay with us right here on the Heart of Innovation, 860 AM. The Answer. Don't go away.
Leg health.
Wow. A couple of things that I kind of want to mention is, one, I'd love to know how old he is. You said he was young, so I'm imagining what, 60s, 50s?
I think he was 57.
Oh God, really young. And he was in a nursing home. And you mentioned that he went into
Well,
the
no,
hospital.
yeah, right. So they sent him to the nursing home because he couldn't move his legs. Well, he couldn't move his legs because they were so profoundly ischemic, I think. And the guy, he's like, they're trying to do physical therapy on me, and I can't feel my legs. I can't move my legs.
And
And
so did they try? Did they try to open it at all at the other place while it could have still been open?
yeah, I mean, I have to be a little bit careful here, but yeah, they did.
I'm imagining that they didn't get down all the way that you would, but because I'm seeing that all the time.
No, they didn't even get back into the vessel in the thigh. It just
No,
it's just I've never told somebody they have to have both their legs amputated. Both of
that's
them.
devastating. And I think it's also really important that people actually hear this from, the doctor's perspective, that it is devastating. That here there are a lot of doctors out there that it's not as devastating for. They're just kind of like, well, it's treatment, it's great. They're not going to die. They're not septic. But I also want to bring the point to people's attention that the reason that you're not going to try, and we always say that you need to try, you mentioned a key word, and it's called sepsis. And at that point, you don't want to try because that could run rampant in the bloodstream as soon as you poke around and you're dead, right? So it might be worth you
Yeah,
explaining a little bit of that.
Do you want to bring me back or bring us back?
Sure.
Thank you.
This is
This is a
860
good
AM.
discussion.
The Answer.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. I'm live at OEIS. It is a conference in Las Vegas. It is the Outpatient Endovascular and Interventional Society Conference. It's their scientific meeting, the 11th annual, and it's where physicians who run office-based centers, you have your hospitals and you have your office-based centers, where they open up the arteries for a disease called peripheral artery disease. If you've tuned in to a lot of our episodes before, you understand that peripheral artery disease are those blockages that are mainly in the leg arteries, and left untreated, you could end up with a heart attack, stroke, or amputation. And amputation is what we were talking about with Dr. Phillips, my wonderful co-host, who had a real heart-wrenching experience just this past week for the very first time, having to tell a patient that he needed bilateral AKAs. And that's the short term. That means both legs above the knee amputations. And John, I want to just bring to people's attention, just first off, that how devastating it is for you as a doctor having to tell a patient. And the fact that you were saying before the break that you're literally, your heart was in tears.
Well, I mean, so we typically have a moment of inspiration. I don't need a quote today for that. I will just take the inspiration from this gentleman and his family, wife, because if someone told me that, number one, he's coming to see us for potentially a Hail Mary, and maybe he knew that and wrapped his head around it. But if someone said to me, hey, you need to go into the hospital right now and get both of your legs amputated, I don't know how I would, keep it together, let alone my wife. But they were both very stoic individuals. And they were also, very kind of, they understood what was at stake here.
Yeah.
So then you have
Just getting a lot of feedback here. Okay, that's better. So yeah, I mean, it was just, I'm fumbling and stuttering here because I was just so frustrated, and thinking about it again got me even more frustrated, because at some point in this gentleman's care, we could have saved at least one leg and not him losing two. But it also just speaks to the fact that there's so many areas of failure in this gentleman's care. It's we talk about failures in the Swiss cheese model, where like all the holes kind of line up in the block of Swiss cheese and you can look from end to end. And that's when something catastrophic usually happens. Well, that's what happened here. The fact that he goes to a nursing home, he should probably never left the hospital, went to a nursing home. They're trying to do physical therapy on someone who's basically, paralyzed from the thighs down. And like, you scratch your head. You're like, this is 2024 and we're still dealing with this BS. And it just, forgive me, but it irks me.
It really hurts. And that's, you had mentioned, and I had asked the question during the break, did they try to open up the vessels below the knee? And that's really a point of contention between some old school doctors and even some younger doctors that don't believe that treating the patient below the knee is effective. And my numbers, I presented at a conference recently. It was called Viva, the Vascular Leaders Forum. And our Leg Saver hotline with the Global PAD Association, I presented this information that we've had nearly 1,000 patients that presented to us on deck for amputation. 85% of those patients, in those cases, the doctors never even tried to restore what we call inline flow, right? Especially that flow below the knee and into the foot, particularly important for those diabetics that have a lot of below the knee small vessel disease, right? And 85% included those doctors who only treated to the knee and refused to treat those vessels below the knee, saying it can't be done, it shouldn't be done, it'll only lead to a revolving door of treatment. So, quote, why delay the inevitable? And this is really disconcerting because, a lot of these amputations might be preventable if only the doctors would take the chance to treat below the knee. And patients will tell you that, you know what, I would rather walk to live another day and live to walk another day. And I would rather delay the inevitable if it means that I can run around with my grandkids or my kids for one more day.
Well, and I think what else this illustrates to some degree is our inability as physicians to potentially, like, not get ahead of our skis and check the ego at the door. There's kind of a cool, this has nothing to do with PAD, but if you remember We Are the World, when 1985, there's a thing on Netflix about how that came together. And so Lionel Richie and Quincy Jones are setting this thing up, and they got all these famous legends coming in to sing this song, and on the door they wrote, check your ego at the door. We as physicians sometimes can't check our egos at the door. So it's like, I can't do it, then no one else can. And that drives me nuts. And so, you know what, frankly, maybe we just punt on that one and take it to the patients and say, hey, when you have an issue, you ask your doctor, how many of these have they done? What kind of intervention, how much are you going to treat? What's blocked in my leg? And why didn't you open that up? And, I guess flip the coin a little bit, because this needs it needs to stop. It really does.
It does. And actually, we have Douglas that wants to jump in and comment. And Douglas, do you want to go ahead and unmute and chime in with your comment?
I know I've said this before, but Dr. Phillips, you're right. And Kim talks about this. I'd rather see you twice a year and keep my legs attached to my body, even if it is another 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever, before maybe I have to go to that part. It's like, I wish I had asked my doctor about the axial bifemoral bypass before, and I knew now, so that I would have had those questions available to know and to be able to ask him, how many of these have you done? And what is your success rate in doing them? And if something goes wrong, what are we going to do then?
Well, because you have, I think there's two types of patients. I was dealing with one gentleman, we're talking about a procedure, and he asked a lot of questions. We don't get that very often. And sometimes that takes a physician aback a little bit when, you know, that instead of disarming the physician, it kind of arms them a little bit, and, you know, that they might feel a little uncomfortable. But to me, that just speaks to the fact that the patient really wants to know. I mean, it's frankly their body, so they should know the ins and outs of it. And, you know, I've never been a huge proponent of this, but I'm obviously starting to change my philosophy. Patients should ask, how many of these have you done? Like, what are the options? And you don't have to get into the details of how you're going to do it, but like, where's my blockage? What are you going to do? And walk me through this. And always, always, always have another opinion, a family member, friend, somebody there who can translate and take notes and whatnot. Because again, this is 2024. And it's just really,
So if I walked
And
in with
especially-
100 questions for you, how would you, what are you, and Marcia, I know we're running out of time, but do you have the time to sit with me and answer 30 questions or 40 questions and draw out what you're going to do? Do you really have the time? Is that what we run into also with the doctor's time?
do I have that time? No, but I've often said to patients, hey, this is kind of the recommendation. Here's what we're thinking. And I'll table it to a telehealth before, you know, hey, let's set up a telehealth call. And then we can talk about it further.
And speaking of time and being limited, we're going to get back to this conversation in just a moment. We have more time ahead, but we're out for now. We're heading to break, and we'll see you in a moment. Stay with us.
Everyone's clear.
And this
Well,
just
this has
speaks
turned in
to-
interesting.
Of course. And it just, again, if anybody from Abbott wants to, or any of our potential sponsors want to listen to this one, or they should listen to this one, because this is why shows like this are so important. It's not necessarily talking about medical breakthroughs and the latest and greatest stent. It's actually getting to the nitty gritty of what we're trying to do here. And who knows, maybe this poor gentleman would have lost his leg anyway. I can't imagine why he would have lost both. The reason he's losing both, I think, is because, in my hunch, he had severe disease on both legs, and then they put the tube in on the left side. The right leg was the one that was worse, and I think the artery was disrupted with that tube on the left, and you know, that's it. And by the time I saw him, there was nothing we could do. In fact, his white count was elevated. He was septic.
Yeah.
And if he would have died if he didn't get that. And that's what I told him. I said, you're going to die if we don't take your legs off.
And that's I do want to address that as we come back, because I think that I'm a big proponent, and I draw the line, and people need to know that there is that line, and that I say that before any amputation, you always get a second opinion. You always make sure that they exhaust all efforts, take wires and balloons, clear into the feet, try antegrade, retrograde. I mean, every approach. This is the exception to the rule. And I've actually had to have this heartbreaking conversation with patients as well, because I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I know what gangrene smells like, and I know what it looks like. And as soon as they say that, it's don't pass go. You need that thing off. Because if you let someone go in there and mess around, and you can explain this better than I can, is it gets into the bloodstream and it just accelerates, right? You can't
Yeah, you get
mess
this
around.
massive called cytokine release that among other things, causes profound vasodilatation or dilation of the vessels, which leads to low blood pressure and shock. And we had one patient, it's been a couple years, but he died after the procedure that it wasn't my case.
1 minute till
but,
the air.
we opened up the leg and it had been closed for such a long time that he had this cascade that ultimately led to his demise. Because these people are sick already, you know. Now this poor guy,
Yep.
he was on is on dialysis. So I mean, the arteries are really bad when you get to that point. But you know, and the other thing too is he had said to me, he said, "Well, okay, you told me what I needed to hear. Let's go and get it done." But that I thought that was pretty inspiring because I would have been pissed as hell, frankly. Maybe he is.
Yeah,
For
it just
sure.
makes me so sad because I just don't know. I can't figure out how it just gets this far. I honestly, and that's what really gets me, and that's what we're talking about here today and over the past few days is
Everyone,
that
sorry to interrupt.
why
10
are these
seconds till we air.
hospitals coming after the office-based labs? Like I'm literally Switzerland. I just want great care wherever it is, and you can have a
860
handful.
AM. The answer.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I'm live in Las Vegas at OEIS, Outpatient Endovascular and International Society's 11th Annual Scientific Meeting. A lot going on here. There has been a battle brewing over the last few years between hospitals and office-based facilities, both treating peripheral artery disease, those blocked arteries below the knees, and competing for patients, even though there shouldn't be any sort of competition. There are more patients to go around. In our experience with the Global PAD Association and trying to facilitate getting care is all of the doctors, no matter what facility, office-based lab or hospitals, everyone is just backed out for months for new patients. And patients just aren't getting in a timely fashion in so many different areas, especially in the rural communities. So one such case could be, you know, with your patient, John, that you've been talking about, that, you know, maybe there were times in which he tried to get in to be seen, maybe was put off for weeks. The process by which this disease progresses, especially when it comes to diabetic patients, it goes fast. If they get to a point where they have a wound, that wound can quickly overnight change, become affected, and that patient can literally within days become septic. And not only their limb is on the line, but their life. And so there aren't enough doctors, there aren't enough facilities to go around, whether it's office-based or hospital. And what we're talking about here at this society meeting is everyone just needs to work together to do what's best for the patients, because patients are suffering in the meantime, and we have way too many amputations. And I know that there's a big school of thought, and rightly so, that we need to target those handful of doctors in these office-based labs that are doing too many procedures on intermittent claudicants, meaning the early stage PAD patients, because what they're arguing is that doing those treatments early is leading to early amputation. But what's interesting is the bigger problem that we have is more than 60% of all amputations are occurring without anyone doing anything. So too few procedures being performed and amputation happening way too often. And more than 90% of those aren't even getting a vascular evaluation at all. And a lot of this could come down to just even the time, the lack of time. We were talking about it with Douglas earlier, the lack of time, lack of doctors. Everyone's just overburdened.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think we have to get to a point where the right patient is seeing the correct patient, seeing the correct doctor for the correct treatment plan. And I don't have an OBL, an office-based lab. These office-based labs play in the sandbox that was created for them by CMS and ultimately then insurance companies. Everybody knows that it's tilted towards certain types of procedures. And some of these procedures pay really, really well, and they're very easy to do based on some of the devices out there, and they're being overutilized for sure. However, so the pendulum swung way far to, let's say, to the left. Well, now they're starting to swing way far to the right, where patients who actually need interventions aren't able to get them in a timely fashion. We're starting to see this now too, with insurance companies asking about we set people up for what we call an angiogram, where we want to take pictures of the arteries and see what they look like. And the insurance companies are asking us, what are you going to do? How many stents are you going to put in? And because they want to capitate this reimbursement. So we have to find a medium and work together as a group, the hospitals, the OBLs, and there's another thing called ASCs, ambulatory surgical centers, where I think these outpatient procedures are ultimately going to land in, where there's just more regulatory monitoring. And that's the problem with the OBLs, in my opinion, from what I know. Not that you can open up a broom closet and then call this and hang a shingle and say this is an OBL, but if you talk to industry people, it's kind of like that in some places, where these ASCs require very specific licensing and overview and quality measures and things. So for example, not to get off a tangent, but this men's health clinic that we're opening, we just had our lab accredited, and it is an uphill battle. Like you are, and rightfully so, but there are a lot of boxes you need to tick off. And I think that's kind of what we need. And then finally, the last thing that I'll say is, with respect to this patient that I've talked about. Number one, well, no, I've got more to say. So him and his wife, I said, I'm going to put you on our radio show because your voice needs to be heard. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, God, I hope he survives this. But both him and his wife were like, yeah, I'll be on this. And his wife was a little bit perplexed. She is in the medical field. And she said, I don't understand this. Like, how did he walk into this hospital, and now he's going to get both his legs taken off in like a month's time, like 4 weeks? Like, she said, I don't understand this. And I know what happened, and I tell them as much as I can, but it's just apoplectic, frankly.
No, and I can tell. It's almost comforting though to hear, for patients that are listening right now, to hear how distraught you are about this situation. And it's something that even, I know that there are bad seeds everywhere. I would love to say that everyone has the best intention at heart, but you know what? There are people that like to skirt around the rules. And I even had one, ProPublica came to me, the media outlet came to me and said, we're trying to make this point that there are too many doctors using these atherectomy devices, those roto-rooting devices that remove the plaque in early stages, and they're just doing it for money. And I could tell her that, yeah, there were a handful that I have seen, but I had never, she asked me to poll our patients, and out of 12,000 patients, we had one that had said they'd been offered a procedure as an intermittent claudican at the time. What's interesting is just last week, I'm really distraught by this one patient that the doctor ended up doing a procedure on a 20% blockage in the leg when the patient only came in and expressed concern about her shortness of breath. And she's a structural heart patient, has had birth defects, things like that. And she was having trouble walking, but, it was more, she was concerned about the shortness of breath as being the reason. He went in, did the test, found out she does have peripheral artery disease, but it was only on the right leg at a 20% level, which shouldn't be a problem. And the other leg was nothing. Went in, stented the superficial femoral artery in the right thigh, then said, we're going to come back in a couple weeks and we're going to do the other leg. She called our hotline, and I said, I need to see the documentation of all of this. So get the documentation. John, you're not going to believe this. The padding of this.
This is a great cliffhanger.
Oh,
this is a great
totally
cliffhanger.
Is.
Stay with us. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Everybody's clear.
We're such a great team.
I know.
Sorry,
But
Douglas. We haven't
John
gotten
knew it
to you.
because you started to see that Kim McNichol's own eyes, just like
I
I'm
know.
about to get into it. We about to
Yep.
do this.
I know. I saw it, but I thought, okay, this is my one chance. This is my one shot. Like Eminem. Eminem, I'm one shot. Don't vomit. Let's
One
go.
shot. Oh, you won't believe this, John. I mean, I've seen doctors do a little code crawling.
I know.
I've seen doctors that, and even good doctors, I've seen them put in there that
I'm
they,
gonna get blacklisted. You know that for
Yeah.
this show. Or
Why?
blackballed or whatever it is. Well, I mean, because I do have to do a disclaimer. I am not a saint by any stretch of the imagination, and I think 95% of physicians would probably feel the same way I do, doing what we do. But there are some where you just develop a callus that gets so thick that you lose sight of the fingers on your hands, if you know what I mean. And so it's like, okay.
But Dr. Phillips, are you human? Don't you have those moments you look at something and go, really? Like, really? Somebody did this or this happened this way? I mean, there's got to be those moments for you where, yeah, you're not perfect, but I mean, there's got to be those moments you look at something like.
I'll tell you this, Douglas, there are moments when I go to some of these conferences and I watch the live cases and I see what happens. And I think, when I'm having a bad day, I look at this stuff and I say to myself, okay, I'm actually pretty good at what I do, because some of the things that people
Some
do.
things you see. I was literally, I couldn't believe that some of the live cases that they would actually show some things that I'm just shaking my head going, and holy cow, even me, as I'm not even a clinician, I'm like, oh no, don't do it. And they do it. Like they're pumping the hell out of that balloon and it dissects the vessel. That's
right,
coming.
and again, not to get off that tangent, but part of a live case is you've got people on a panel that they're not trying to get you to do something stupid or wrong. But I mean, all of a sudden, all these ideas start getting thrown out there. And, we do a lot of live cases and we always have a plan and we do not deviate from it. We don't let the audience dictate changes, because that's when the wheels fall off. But you're right. I mean, it's like a car crash. I mean, you're driving by on the highway and your head just does this. You have to look at it. But yeah. But so that I hope this gentleman survives, because I definitely want to have him on the show, because his wife, she was pissed. Like, you could tell.
Yeah, I would have to, and it would be interesting because you can't share the details and they can, and it'll be a while, so hopefully people will stay with us, and maybe later into the summer when he's recovering and kind of coming to terms with things. But also send the family our way, because we have a great amputee group that would love to help support him, through the process. And maybe he can join our DEI committee and we can inspire him to help influence and create the change that he wants to see, in the world, based on his experience. But
well, because you have to try to find a silver lining.
Hold on one sec.
I think.
Everyone, just want to let you know, 10 seconds till we air.
All right. Well, I'm taking it back. Or no, Kim's back. But I'm going to take it back.
8:60 a.m. The Answer.
I want to hear this cliffhanger.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Welcome back to the show. Before we went to break, Kim had me hanging over the edge of a mountain on a cliffhanger, about to tell me a little bit about, I guess, a patient that contacted the Leg Saver hotline who had a questionable procedure on one leg and maybe was going to have another questionable one on the other.
Yeah, it was just really bad. They had the documentation in there and it was just bad news. I mean, talking about how this patient had cold feet and they had claudication when they were walking and all this stuff. And I asked the patient, hey, did you have any of this happening? And she said, absolutely not. I never said anything about that. So it's interesting that it was in the documentation. The patient never said it, ended up with a procedure that she didn't need. I didn't make the determination myself. I was able to get her a second opinion from a conservative doctor. Actually, you and I both know, and he's very well respected. And they said, you know what? Yeah, I'm really disturbed by this whole thing and have told the patient to pretty much run. But I have with me right now, so I told you I'm at the OEIS conference, the 11th annual scientific meeting. I have Chad Lorich here, and he is one of my favorite, he's one of my favorite limb savers that we've had. We've shared some patients, and so we're talking about, this is Dr. John Phillips. He's out of Ohio Health, and
How you doing?
we're just talking about the OEIS show and, just the issues that we're discussing, the issues with reimbursement, the hospitals with the OBLs. So I'm just wondering, is there anything that's really caught your attention? Any discussions that would be interesting just to bring up and raise?
Man, that's a broad question.
We're always full of loaded ones.
Yeah, I think it depends on what angle I haven't been a part of the conversation thus far, but what angle you're looking at. The business is pretty broad. Coming from a patient care focus, I don't think much has changed. I think some of the downward, I see my kind of viewpoint on the downward pressure on reimbursement in the OBL space, in the outpatient space. I kind of see that as a good thing because it's kind of gotten some of the riffraff out. Just being in some of the conversation where there's maybe some guys that are in it for the wrong reasons or pushing on the wrong fronts, pulling on the wrong levers too much. I think it's tempered that out to where I see a lot of the guys in the field, even this year at the OAS, but even a lot of guys that I talk to around guys meeting other physicians that are in the space are the guys that are in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
That are the ones who are the ones that are patient first. I say their give a crap factor is, a 10 out of 10 and on the clinical front and their outcomes and what they're doing for their communities. So I think that, I see it as a good thing. I'm not sure if I'd say that on stage in front of the OIS, although I'm about to talk here and give a talk in a few minutes. And I'll probably say something to that similar effect to say, hey, like the industry, some things are self-regulating. I think it's been good pressures because the only way that you do well is to do good. You put your patient first, you have your good outcomes, you do appropriate care for people and then the backside happens. But yeah, you still got to be smart. But yeah, that's kind of I may have a unique thing. And a guy that's been in the outpatient space, I still think that even though, my reimbursements have gone down, but we've found a way to do just fine,
Yeah, and
Good point that you make, just simply because I was having a conversation at dinner with a couple folks from industry, and they were saying just the same thing, that there have been quite a few office-based labs that have gone out of business, but there are other ones that are popping up in their place. And so that I find that interesting. And we were talking about it just being that, yes, some of the ones that might have been just in it for the money are ended up going out, and you're getting the people that are really looking to do more for the patients. I just talked to a couple of hospital doctors here that are also leaving to actually start their own office-based lab or join another office-based lab because they want to do more for the patients without restrictions. And they're not worried about the money. They just want to help the patients.
yeah, and I would say too that you have again, I'm a hospital employee and I only work in a hospital. There's more than enough patients for everybody. From what I understand, if you're going to go in the office, or if you're going to go into the outpatient space, you probably need to do an ambulatory surgical center as opposed to a straight up OBL. At least that's what people tell me. Having said that, though, I always preach, and when people ask my opinion, and it's not very often, but if you do stuff in the OBL and you work in a hospital too, you should practice the same way in the hospital and the OBL. I know a lot of people that use, expensive balloons and things in the hospital, but when that patient shows up in an OBL, they don't use what I consider the standard of care. And that drives me absolutely nuts. And I know the guys and gals that have the OBLs that do practice what they preach, both in hospital and out, I think do well and are in for the right reasons, as Chad was saying.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. My thoughts on the outpatient space should always be, you shouldn't go to a market and open an outpatient space to have an outpatient lab. If you have a local committed physicians that are kind of integrated into the local medical community, and then they offer this as an additional site of service for their patients,
Right.
because access and other enhancements, I think that's the way to do it. that's why we've been fortunate to go to, and so, yeah, we do a lot of the heavy lifting in the hospitals. We're taking call 24/7. Last night I did or I guess it was during the day, and we got in the afternoon before I came up, I did a, pulmonary embolism and sucked a bunch of clot out of a lung, dealt with inpatient, did a bunch, three other consults, and, did 4 angios in my outpatient shop. And so we're doing both every day. I think that's the model that I've seen be very sustainable and very much enhance communities and access. So yeah, it's good that, I think
it's like Smokey the Bear. Only you can prevent a forest fire. So only we as interventionalists can change the behaviors of other interventionalists who may, be in it for the wrong reasons. And it behooves us before the government ultimately may crack down.
Right. The more we self-regulate as a professions, and I think that includes all 3 specialties, vascular and IR and cardiology. I think the more we're good citizens. One thing that I've heard multiple times said, even at the OEIS conference, is, hey, be a good citizen. Like, you have to have an internal moral professional compass, and if you're putting the patient first and doing your best work, regardless of setting, okay, yeah, that's why, in our shops, we do obviously use drug-coated balloons and we use Sapira stents, and we, the technology that's seen is more expensive. You just have to have options available to you so that you can do the appropriate, therapy. Or, we've done, our walking programs or smoking cessation and all the conservative care that needs to go into our clinic lifting. Some weeks I spend 2.5 out of my 5 days in clinic seeing patients and doing medical management of things, so that's heavy lifting that a lot of guys don't want to do as well, but it's absolutely critical if you're going to have a successful comprehensive practice where you're going to do good,
Right. And it's, again, pigs eat well and get plump and hogs get slaughtered. So you've got to find a good balance.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be smart on the financial side, but that's, we're all, honestly, come on, man, we're all doing fine. So
no one's going hungry.
Exactly. So do good work, just do good,
Yeah, I think that's amazing for patients here. Chad Lords, thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
I appreciate you. Come on back when you're done with your presentation.
I will come say hi again.
Yes, definitely.
Take care. See you, Chad.
That was fun. We're live here at the OEIS conference in Las Vegas. And so
I love meeting new people too. So that's sweet.
It was fantastic. Next time you should come sit at the booth with me. Are you going to NCVH in New Orleans coming up? Big conference?
I am thinking about it. Yeah, thinking about it.
Okay. I think we need to broadcast live from there. I think it'd be absolutely fun. And speaking of fun, we're going to continue this really fun conversation in just a moment. Stay with us right here on 860 AM The Answer. Don't go away.
Everyone's clear. We got a minute till we air.
Sorry about the background stuff.
No, was
that fun?
This is live, and the fact that I think we can put together a pretty darn good show with basically no notice speaks to. Now we'll see what the people that ultimately listen to this think, but I definitely will be, since I reached out to some industry folks to see if they would consider helping. This is a show that they should listen to.
Hold on, I want to
You know what makes it the show and what y'all two do together is from the heart. None of us out here, it's all from your heart, and that's what we enjoy the most about y'all, and that's why this show is what it is because it comes from the heart.
10 seconds till we air.
10 seconds.
Yeah, that's do you want to take us back?
Sure.
This is 860 AM. The Answer.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
It's hard to believe that this show is almost over. We've only got a few minutes left. We were just talking about during the break how we had a certain show theme planned and we had to pivot. I think this is a great show. We've had really candid conversations. I know Kim's having a lot of fun out in Vegas. I don't know. Are you going to do some partying tonight? Maybe spend a little money?
No, you know what? It's interesting. When I first came in on Wednesday night, Dr. Craig Walker, who is a top interventional cardiologist out of Louisiana with the Cardiovascular Institute of the South, he nabbed me. I was able to have dinner with him. And also there's a company called Reflow that creates some sort of a stent that has spikes and supposedly
Yep, I know it.
might be
Yep.
removable.
It is.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's on a balloon. Yeah. Yep.
So
we call it a temporary stent.
I had dinner with him. I had dinner with a Dr. Eric Dipple out of Iowa, which was really fun, exciting. And
Yeah,
they
I like
were,
Eric.
it was, he's very forthcoming with his opinions and cares so
certainly
much
is.
about very passionate about the patients. It comes through so much. So we were out till 1 o'clock in the morning. And then Dr. Stephen Lashak, who's out of Memphis and Tennessee and South Haven, ends up, I'm walking down the Paris, they have this brick or cobblestone area, and this is 1:30 in the morning. And he's like,
Nothing,
"Hey,
Kim,
are you Kim McNicholas?" I
nothing
was like,
goes
"Oh my
well.
God, Stephen Lashak."
Nothing good happens after midnight, Kim. We all know that.
So he and I ended up talking till 2:30 in the morning, just about everything, because he's, worked with so many of our patients. And I'd never met him in person, which is great about this conference, meeting people in person that I've only dealt with via phone. And we were out there in the lobby area, and this newlywed couple, one of them was the former police chief of Chicago, comes in with his newlywed. They come in with donuts. I mean, coming to vascular people with big things of donuts, each case of donuts costs $80 for 6 donuts. I am not kidding. I was like, are they made of gold? So we
Wow,
ended up
must be pretty
taking one. It
tasty.
tasted like a donut, but
Yeah. Well,
didn't taste any
again, it
different.
probably tastes better. It probably tastes better at 9 a.m. Right?
That's what I was thinking. So, we've had quite a few late nights, great dinners here, but the last 2
What are you
nights,
gonna
no,
What
I
are you
was
gonna
in bed
take?
early.
I think we've got probably 2 minutes left or so. What are you gonna take home? Like two big points, two big take home points for you at this conference. What do you think?
I think the fact that everybody here seems to be on the same page in creating standards that put the patient first, encouraging more evidence on below the knee treatments to create a standard with that, because with the big boom in diabetes, we have more diabetics that are forming peripheral artery disease and have this below the knee disease, and we can't just keep cutting off legs without even trying. And so we need to create the standards in the societies, whether it's the OAIS Society for Vascular Surgery, interventional cardiology societies,
Yep.
interventional radiology, but all come together to create standards that are going to improve these outcomes and reduce the number of amputations, especially for diabetics.
Yeah, I think a lot of good content out there. At the end of the day, you do what's right for the patient, and you will be rewarded on multiple levels. I think that the conversation that we had about the gentleman who's going to lose both his legs, or maybe has lost them, I'm not sure yet, but is pretty sobering. And it just
Yeah.
speaks to the fact that this mission is not done. This is a race we probably will never complete or win, but we have to keep fighting. We have to fight for funding, and we have to fight to keep this message alive. Because if your candle or flame goes out, Kimberly, there are going to be a lot of patients that are going to suffer. So I'm going to keep fighting with you.
I'm right alongside you. Couldn't have a better partner in crime. With that, we hope you have a really great weekend to everyone. Hopefully you'll join us again next Saturday.
Stay tuned, everybody. Have a great weekend. And Kim, don't lose too much money. Please do not lose too much money.
So everyone on that side's clear now. I'm just gonna let this play out on my side.
Oh, great. There's actually a gentleman who's sitting right next to me. He's been sitting next to me.
I've got to run. I've got an appointment. I've got to take my daughter to get a car in.
I just have to share one thing. This
Yes.
is really cool.
What is
It's
it?
called CV Sustain. And I did not know that they did this. You know how much trash comes out of every single procedure with
Oh,
the catheters and all that
buckets.
stuff? They
Buckets.
actually are
What is that? I
giving,
can't. Your
so they're
background's
giving
blurry. Oh.
cash for trash.
Oh, okay.
So with IVUS, so Philips, IVUS, the intravascular ultrasound catheters, and Shockwave Medical, their catheters, they actually give you, and they recycle them. They
What's it called?
actually
I'm going to look this up. CV.
CV Sustain, Sustain,
Okay.
and his name is Kurt at KURT at cvsustain.com. And it's really cool. I've been wondering ever since, I've been in so many different procedures and I've even taken out the trash. And there's literally a huge garbage can filled with all of the remnants from just one procedure. And when I met him and he's sitting right next to me, and I'm going, oh my God, this is a great answer
Yeah.
that they end up recycling these things and they pay the doctors for their trash
Well,
and
because
they
then
take care of it.
I'm on their website. It says save 50% by purchasing reprocessed IV catheters. But so the buyback. So they buy used. Oh yeah, I'm going to look into this. Kim, I got to bounce. Have an awesome night. Don't do anything crazy. And again, nothing good happens after midnight.
Nope. Actually, I'm headed home. So
Good.
I'm on a flight. I'm going home.
All right, I'll see you,
I'm
everybody.
in the midst of cigarette smoke. Speaking
Oh.
of vascular, holy cow.
Yes, I'll see you guys. Cheers.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
So it's been incredible, but being here, I have this permanent headache. In case anyone joined early on to this live stream, permanent headache from all the cigarette smoke. So I don't
That's
know.
crazy. I got a question for you.
Yes.
So it sounds like what we've talked about sometimes before is the standards in having to meet specific standards. Are there really truly set standards for each group? Like like we have 4 different doctors. Do each doctor group have a different standards than the other, or is it like what Dr. Phillips was talking about? Somewhere along the line there, something was missed. Absolutely. And with what you were saying, something was missed. And was it the standards? Was it just
There is no, so it really starts with the standard for testing, the diagnostics, the awareness in the primary care and the podiatry world of peripheral artery disease. And even the fact that it can be treated, there's still some practices that don't think that peripheral artery disease can be treated in the early stages. And that there are opportunities for supervised exercise therapy programs. Walking is the best medicine. Getting a patient with a dietitian, especially if they have diabetes or are overweight and need some guidance. Great, let's get that intervention early on when it's possible to actually either prevent or stall progression. The other issue is we have a shortage of endocrinologists, the doctors that focus on diabetes and help people with their insulin management. If they're not available, then it just goes and falls back on the primary care, and the primary care doctors are already overburdened with so many different patients and so many different ailments that they're trying to handle from patient to patient. These diabetics aren't even being handled early on. And one of our friends in the network, he's one of our global PAD advocates, Sally Hendricks out of South Africa, will tell you when he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, he was never even told about vascular complications. He wasn't told about the eye complications. He was basically told, okay, go home, control your blood sugar, and you'll be fine. And he wasn't told about the repercussions. What happens if your blood sugar is out of control? What happens if you have just one extra sugar molecule in your arteries that damages those arteries? They don't talk about that. And that's, we need education sooner, especially for those who have high risk factors. Even if someone is diagnosed with high cholesterol or high blood pressure, the doctor needs to sit down and have the discussion about what happens if your blood pressure doesn't get under control? What happens if you don't control your cholesterol? Peripheral artery disease is one of those things that might happen. And in so many cases, I think I saw, our DEI chairman, Charles Winters, who's on here as well. What if his doctor actually told him in the early stages of kidney disease that this could be an issue, but they don't. Most do not have that discussion. And so I would imagine with this gentleman that John was talking about, that they didn't have the discussion with him about mitigating these risk factors and what would happen if he didn't eat right, if he didn't keep walking and he didn't have the support. And that's where the Global PAD Association is trying to come in and fill this gap and take the burden, the pressure off of all of these doctors that just have so many patients and so little time anymore. And we can help them. We can get them on our walking program. We can help them with their diet. We can help them make sure to understand what will happen if their kidney disease isn't under control and if their diabetes isn't under control or cholesterol or blood pressure. And so there are just so many factors. And so, Douglas, I know this is a loaded question and quite a long answer, but that's then on the early stages. Then on top of that, you have what's called the ARC Act, ARC. And if you have any chance to talk to your congressman, make sure that they are voting for this and pushing this through. What the ARC Act does is it makes testing for PAD standard practice and reimbursed for all Medicare patient and all, I think it's group insurance patients that have high risk factors would have access to early testing for PAD, which would actually spread awareness more to the primary care doctors that, hey, you're getting reimbursed. You need to do this test for these patients that are high risk so we can catch them early when conservative treatment is possible to not only prevent, but even stall progression of peripheral artery disease. Now, then you fast forward now to the treatment using intervention and surgical methods of opening up the arteries or treating the arteries, treating blocked arteries, whether it's with a wire and balloon through what's called endovascular, or it's through surgical means. It could be an endarterectomy, which includes the scraping out of the plaque, or then a bypass where you reroute the blood flow around a blockage. And then the final one, of course, we don't consider treatment, we consider it failure, which is what John was talking about with his patient. Not just the failure in treatment, but it's just the failure in the whole overall system of not catching this sooner. And that's amputation. And there are society guidelines. There are society guidelines that actually do talk about the protocols, but they're not requirements, right? They're not, their feet are not held to the fire except with insurance saying we will or we won't cover X, Y, or Z. And that's what's really frustrating. What's most frustrating for me is that there is no standard that dictates or guides a doctor in how many procedures can be done if amputation is on the line, how many procedures can be done to help a patient keep their legs longer. And yet that's what the media is latching on to. The real story that you all have told me, all of the patients in our network have told me their experiences, too few procedures before amputation. And society guidelines do suggest that a doctor at least try to restore inline flow, restore that blood flow below the knee and into the foot, restore inline flow to that point of amputation that you're going to do. Try to restore inline flow prior to any amputation. And more than 85% of patients that have come to us that have been on deck for amputation, that we have ended up getting them a second opinion and getting them saved, 85% of them told us that a doctor never even tried to restore the inline flow, meaning they're not following society guidelines. There are guidelines, they're not following it. And that's not getting the attention of the media. And that's what doesn't make sense for me. So everybody needs to come together and put their egos aside and say, you know what? We all have a mission. We want what's best for the patients. We want improved outcomes. We want to reduce amputations. And we have to sit in a room and not leave that room until we can actually come together on an agreement that this is how it's going to happen. But it's going to take cross-practice collaboration.
And can you imagine what the gentleman would be if Dr. Phillips' nurse practitioner that used to be with him had not been there?
Yep.
Because if she had not noticed what she saw and got him where she did, I can imagine it would have just gotten worse and worse, because apparently it was getting missed constantly, wasn't it?
Yep. I have a feeling that, I mean, there was an opportunity. It sounded as though until we talked to the patient themselves, we don't have the details, so we can make assumptions,
Right.
but it did sounded as though the doctor only tried potentially treating maybe to the knee, maybe even some things they did to one leg impacted the other leg. We're not really sure, but ultimately the patient was ischemic, meaning his legs were dead. They were petrified all the way down. And it sounded as though there might have been some wet gangrene, meaning that there was some serious infection there that was getting into the blood. And at this point, Dr. Phillips made that right decision. It's so hard to believe that it gets to that point. I just don't even understand, because there is a progression. Yes, it can be fast, but it should never get to that wet gangrene stage. I just don't understand it. That's just that to me, that's unconscionable.
So at what point then, that brings up another question for me. At what point then do doctors, where along the line did doctors not learn to go? Was it customary never to go below the knee, or is that something that's just new and has, in the last 10 years or whatever, come out where they can do that now? Because I know my doctor did not even go below the knee because he said it couldn't be done. But we know now that they're going through the bottom of the foot now. They're going through the ankle, and they're doing amazing things. So where along the lines there then do we change that philosophy with the doctors?
Well, I think it would be great just to get those doctors on the show and let them explain their theory, but I wouldn't have them on the show without having the counterpoint, the doctors that are doing it. And I think it would be a great discussion if people are amenable to having that discussion and having that lively debate and conversation, so that we can all understand their different philosophies. But my thing is that, you know what, if you don't treat below the knee and you don't believe in it, that's fine. Tell your patient, you know what? I know that there are doctors that might treat below the knee, and maybe it'll keep your leg another day or two. Who knows? Maybe it'll keep you for another 5 years. I don't do it. I don't believe in it. I think it just leads to a revolving door of procedures. So my suggestion is, let's just do the amputation. If you want to get a second opinion, it's up to you. So you have to make that choice, but give the patient the option. Don't just say it can't be done and shouldn't be done, period. And your only option is amputation. And here is a patient that's sitting in the hospital that if they don't do that amputation, they're going to have to check out of that hospital against medical advice, AMA, which means that insurance may not cover any other procedure that might be done. Might not even cover the hospital stay. There are some pretty strict insurance out there. And I don't think that that's fair to the patient. I think that our whole argument is, that's fine, you do you. But you know what? Don't argue for your own limitations. Just be honest about, this is my skill set. This is what I believe. This is what I want to do. Patient, you've come to me. You've asked me what I think. This is what I think. Take it or leave it. Take it or leave it. There are all of these other options. I'm not going to talk about them here. I don't care if a doctor talks about them, but at least let the patient know that they should always get a second opinion and that there might be other options.
And with that
That's all we
thought, so
ask.
you're not a doctor. How long you been doing this?
Since 2016.
And out of everything you've been through, I can't begin to think of everything you know about how technology has changed from then to today and what they could do then and what they can do now.
What's even more interesting, though, is how much when I go to Europe and I'm in some of these, there are a lot more devices that are available here in the United States. And I do think that, that it's always good to make sure that regulations and guidelines do keep up with the pace of innovation, but we have that across the board. We even see that with AI, that it's tough for federal regulations to keep up with the innovation that's happening around that as well to make sure that doesn't spiral out of control. It's just inherent of technology and innovation in that regulations, guidelines, they just don't seem to keep up with innovation. So sometimes you have to backtrack, and sometimes there are going to be people that are going to find the loopholes in the system and be able to, you know, um, maybe not make the best decisions, right, for the patients, over money. And so that is a real issue. But it's amazing to see over in Europe what they can do with a wire and balloon sometimes. Very primitive, just a wire and a plain old balloon, or what they call a POB. If they just take the time, they have the finesse with the wire to be able to take that wire and just finagle it through calcium. But what's interesting to me is that I cut my teeth on PAD in Italy with some of the pioneers in treating PAD. Dr. Marco Monzi, Dr. Mariano Polagna, Dr. Roberto Ferraresi. I mean, some of these doctors literally were taking wires and balloons clear into the foot long before I have seen them doing it here in the US. And so when I started going to procedures in the US and seeing them stop at the knee and treating and not going below the knee, I couldn't understand why that was happening. I said, I don't understand, doctor. Why don't you treat below the knee? I see it all the time in Europe. I've been to 9 cities in 11 days in Europe. I'm coming back to the US, and every one of those doctors was treating clear into the foot. In fact, they would spend a long time treating that small artery in the foot. And I just didn't understand why the doctors here weren't doing it. And the doctors here were saying, well, it'll just close up. It'll just lead to a revolving door of treatment. And then you talk to Marco Monzi, who literally almost doesn't even do any case without treating below the knee. And they have it. I think at the last conference I was at last month there in Italy, he was saying that they have an 85% success rate, and they have a very low readmission rate, one of the lowest readmission rates in all of that region. And they treat clear to the foot. So I just think that maybe there needs to be some standard guidelines and techniques on how to do it that could be more mainstream, because there are quite a few studies that are out there. There's, I think the one's called the Best CLI study, where they say that still bypasses are better than, treating endovascularly. But were the people that were doing the endovascular procedures as part of that study using the more advanced tools and techniques? I was told behind the scenes that they weren't. And so it wasn't really a fair study. And in fact, I talked to 2 doctors who dropped out of that study who said they just didn't feel like it was ethical. They didn't like the direction. They felt like it was completely, their mind was made up of the direction. They wanted to prove that bypasses were the best for every patient who had the below the knee disease. And so, yeah, there's just so much happening, and there are no clear answers as to how this is all going to shake out. But as you heard with Chad Lorich, who practices in Minnesota, I think that was Minnesota is where he practices. He was saying that you know, everything that's happened recently in the past year with the ProPublica article and New York Times article, it's really shaken up the industry, and it's really lit a fire under everyone. Yes, it's caused so much fury. It's led to horrifying delays in treatment. For even the most advanced stages, CLI patients, critical limb ischemia patients, the people that have rest pain that wakes them up at night, and the wounds that develop on the feet. We're seeing delays in those patients because of those articles. The insurance companies are denying and delaying those procedures to open arteries for those patients, which again, my favorite word in this is it's unconscionable. But the good news out of this whole thing is we're now having the conversation between hospitals, between OBLs, between societies, between doctors, even here, that, you know what? If there were a handful of doctors, which we know there were probably a handful of doctors that were maybe doing too many procedures too soon, because they made money, and we've shaken those out. And now, just the doctors that are really focused on patients are in these office-based labs, then that's a good thing. And we're going to work through it. Right. And we're going to stick it out. And those great doctors are going to keep doing what they're doing. Doesn't matter about the lower reimbursement or whatever shakes out with that. We're going to keep saving patients' limbs, and we're going to keep fighting insurance companies if we need to for timely, effective limb and ultimately life-saving care.
Are you seeing that where you are now with the different companies and and how people are trying to come together now different than it was?
Ugh. I think that there's certain segments of people, like, for example, here at the OEIS conference that I'm at, you see vascular surgeons, interventional radiologists, and interventional cardiologists all talking together, working together, collaborating, trying to strategize on how to move forward with the patient's best interest at heart and doing the right thing. I think that that's amazing. We've also seen the Society for Vascular Surgery, the Society for Cardiovascular Angiography and Intervention. That's the Society for Interventional Cardiologists. And then the Society for Interventional Radiology. They've all come together in what's called the Pulse campaign. And that's a campaign to raise awareness for PAD. And it's nice to see them coming together to just try and get PAD on the mind, PAD on the tongue in the mainstream audience. So we're seeing some of these nice collaborations, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And I also there's a company here called Reflow, and they have this new campaign that they're going to be launching. We're hoping in partnership with us, where we bring interventional cardiologists, interventional radiologists, and vascular surgeons to the table in a variety of different conversations where they can share their different perspectives and share how they're coming together. So in small ways, I think we're getting there. The last conference I was at, Viva, the Vascular Leaders Forum, Robert Lookstein, who's an interventional radiologist from Mount Sinai, said, we need to all make an agreement in this room of all practices, and even the FDA and whomever it is. We all need to come together, and we need to not go to the media with our problems. We need to come together and speak up about the problems, get everyone together in a room, and let's solve those problems. If a patient's life and limb are at stake, we need to come together, and it should not be through the public, the forum of public opinion. It needs to come from the society, and everyone come together and have a meeting of the minds. And I agree with that, because when you go to the media the way you do, you're not in control of the story, and you're only getting one side of the story. And maybe that was the angle for some people. They just wanted, to get their side of the story because they want to win. I don't know. But if you're not in it just to win and for ego, then you're going to actually do what these societies are wanting to do right now, which is to come to the table and have the conversation, and let's create the standards together. Let's, collaborate somehow.
And I've said this to you many a time when we've talked about this. I think, this is me, I think patients need to be at that table with those doctors also.
Yeah, and I think that through us being at the table and being at these conferences, we're getting a variety of everyone. It's not just one or two patients. As every single patient with PAD seems to present differently. You all have your own story, you all have your own journey. And so what we find is that if just one or two patients are coming to the table to share the story, it's not representative of everybody. And, one patient, for example, went to the New York Times and says, "Oh, I had too many procedures that led to amputation." So that becomes the story. And it's just, so everyone is having too many procedures that are leading to amputation. That becomes the story versus I'm going to come to the table and I'm going to say, there may be this one, there may be this one, there may be, too few procedures, there might be too many amputations. Like I can bring them all together. I can raise all of your voices together. And that's why I like, Charles, our DEI committee chairman, and actually you, Douglas, and I think Marcia was on here, all part of the DEI committee that came up with the idea to come to our table, having nearly 24 patients of a variety of different experiences versus saying, let's just have one or two token patients at their table. Come to our table and bring your standards. Listen to us here. Come to our territory and let's have that conversation. And we already had that organization, Insight Vascular, that has office-based labs in Alaska, Hawaii, and Washington that came to the table, and they were able to have all of our crew review their discharge papers, their intake forms, talk about, the issues with, with how clinics are dealing with the patients and what more they can do to make a patient feel more at home and to comply with the lifestyle modifications that are so important. So I invite more people, and I think every society needs to come to our table and present to all of you.
So with that thought, and where do you see it going with the standards, with the practices, with all of it? Where do you see it going or leading from here in your hopes, in your dreams and passion of what you believe in?
For us, we're Switzerland, right? I don't care if a doctor's in a hospital. I don't care if they're in an office-based lab. I just want what's best for the patient. And each patient, as I said, presents differently, right? They present differently. They have different needs. They have different insurance. They're in different circumstances. We've had patients that will not step foot in a hospital because they're scared of coming down with some other virus like during COVID. So they only wanted to go to an office-based lab. I have people that say they don't want to go to an office-based lab. They have too many comorbidities. Their heart's at stake. They are single even. They don't have anyone at home to take care of them. So having a procedure inside the hospital with an overnight stay is best for them. We need options for patients. And I hope that this is the direction that everyone is going, that everyone will respect that there should be options for patients. Patients should have a right to choose what care feels best for them and be able to make a more informed decision, be able to get that second opinion from a different practice. There's an insurance company up in Michigan that only allows vascular surgeons to see these patients. And that alienates interventional cardiologists and interventional radiologists in that particular area. And that sucks. And different patients might have different needs, different preferences, their different skill sets. You never know. And also, just in that more than 30% of hospitals across the US have job postings for vascular surgeons. There just aren't enough. So even if we say vascular surgery is the best place to go, there aren't enough of them to go around. We have communities where there is one vascular surgeon for 4 different hospitals in literally a 2-hour radius. This poor doctor has to run from one to another. And we lost a patient because of that. The doctor was in an emergency over here and they couldn't get the vascular surgeon to the other hospital in time. And that's really sad. So what I'm hoping is that everyone just put down their dukes, put their ego aside, recognize that the treatment for PAD is evolving. Is it perfect? No. Is every doctor perfect? No. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. And we talk about that all the time. We're all learning. We're all growing. I think that 99.99999% of everyone who's involved in this industry really does have the best intentions at heart. There are always a few bad seeds. We talk about there might be a few bad airline pilots, a few bad police officers. I mean, we see them. There are a few bad retailers. I mean, who doesn't have an industry that doesn't have a few bad seeds, right? But I come from the frame of mind that I like to think that everyone has the patient's best interest at heart, because that's why they got into medicine in the first place. And sometimes maybe a doctor might need a reminder that that's why they got into this practice in the first place, is for the patients. And patients are humans. Patients are people. I remember we had nurse practitioner Kay Smith. She always would say, patients are people, people are patients. And we have to always remember that. And I think with that in mind, what's really comforting in going to these different conferences is I'm seeing more and more of these doctors that have so much passion for patients, and they really do want to do the right thing. And even a couple of them that have come up to me have owned up to the fact that maybe their skill set isn't up to par with what we would typically expect. But one of them said to me, but can you put me in contact with someone who could help bring me up to speed? I thought that was the coolest moment of this entire conference, is someone that cares so much about patients. They want to do more. They want to learn more. I think we'll get there. It's just going to take time. And I think us as patients, we all have to come together. And it has to be almost like the Susan G. Komen Foundation, where it took a rising up of the patients to say, hey, wait a minute, let's do what's right. And this is what we think is right as patients.
Absolutely. And I absolutely agree that all of us need to be at the table, because everyone brings a different perspective. Everyone brings their inspiration, hope, and courage to that table, but they also bring their different perspectives about what they've been through.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm gonna let you guys, if Heinz wants to jump in, Marsha wants to jump in for a few minutes. I think I see Charles on there that might want to jump in. I want to
well, we have to remind you, remember, you're there in representative of us, so don't do nothing after midnight that none of us would do.
Nope. It was, it was just amazing that to see the doctors that couldn't wait to meet me for the first time in person. I've seen their cases. They've done great for, our friends in the group. We've, I feel like with some of them, we've been through so much together in trying to fight for patients, like Craig Walker Douglas. The fact that he remembered your name, just with as many people, he could see up to 100 patients a day. And he remembered you. He remembered your name. He remembered Thomas's name. And not only your first name, he remembered your last name. And that speaks volume for that doctor. And having the conversation with him, one of my prize moments, this was also an interesting moment, that, in what we do and the message that we're putting out there. And sometimes I can be a little bit forceful in my messaging on LinkedIn, because I care so much about every one of you. I know you know that. That if you recall the Deion Sanders situation, Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, former NFL football star, and I think he's a CU coach, Colorado coach. is it University of Colorado or CU? I think it's CU. Coach for football. Anyway, he was in Mississippi as a coach, and he ended up with a few amputations of toes because he's hypercoagulable. They wouldn't call it peripheral artery disease, so we couldn't look it up. He won't relate to us because they won't call it that, because peripheral artery disease is defined by atherosclerosis in the arteries. So meaning calcium, hard plaque, right? That's causing restricted blood flow. And so he ended up going to Colorado, and in Colorado, he ended up with the same issue. He was hypercoagulable. He had blood clots. And we know that if someone's over 50, they likely have plaque in their leg arteries. So you could probably call it PAD, because the treatment's going to be pretty much the same, whether it's just blood clots or blood clots. And they're going to go in there. They might take a catheter delivery of clot busting drugs and just pop it in there. They might use a thrombectomy device to suck out the clot. Then they're going to use a balloon and they're going to push the rest of the plaque aside, possibly use a stent, whatever it might be. But needless to say, Coach Prime was on the verge of another amputation. And this time they were looking at taking even more, possibly his leg, possibly his foot. We weren't quite sure. But in this social media video that they posted, one of the doctors, Max Wooler, says, you know what? We could try to open up those arteries again below the knee, but it'll only close up. And basically, why delay the inevitable? It's just a revolving door. And I was livid in seeing this, because not just because of what he said, but it was because of the social media comments, other patients that were in Coach Prime's situation saying, oh, that's interesting. So if Coach Prime's doctors are saying, don't try to open up those arteries, it's not worth it, just go for amputation, why not us? We're going to go for amputation. And I saw that in the thread of comments, and I'm like, oh my God, we need to stop this madness. This is not good. And so I called them out on LinkedIn and I said, hey, you guys got to do the right thing. Please don't put that message out there. Each individual person, needs the best and deserves the best chance to keep their legs. Don't spread this message that it's not worth trying to open up the arteries, because Society for Vascular Surgery and American Heart Association guidelines dictate that an attempt should be made to restore inline flow prior to any amputation. So that's the message that should be offered. If you're going to do a social media post that's going to be that high profile with a star, Deion Sanders, PAD doesn't have a face, a big face, a celebrity face, right? And so if Deion's going to come out with that, we got to make sure that it has the right message. So what's interesting is they did end up doing the right thing. And they probably, there were probably a lot of nerves, for the doctors, and things didn't come out the way they meant them to come out. And I understand that. But I'm sitting down in the bar area late at night after dinner, just talking to Dr. Craig Walker and Dr. Eric Dipple and some representatives from a company called Reflow that we mentioned has that stent that has the spikes that pokes into the plaque, and you leave it in there for like 6 minutes, and then the stent can actually be removed. Something that they're working on. Hopefully we'll get FDA approval at some point if it's helpful for patients. But we were sitting down there, and this gentleman, Raphael, comes up and he's talking. And then Craig Walker whispers to me, he says, oh, that's, one of Deion Sanders' doctors. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so we continue talking, and Raphael comes around and he walks right up to me and he's like, hi, my name's Raphael. I'm a doctor in Colorado. And I said, hi, I'm Kim. And he's like, Kim McNicholas. He's like, we talk about you. He said, you caused quite a stir. You were a big point of discussion and a point of contention, with our crew on how we were going to handle the social media buzz that you created. And in that moment, I was thinking, right, wrong, or indifferent, we had an impact. I think we influenced the care and hoping that they would take a step back and go, whoa, we gotta stop for a second and think about the message we're putting out there. And we've got to at least try. And maybe they would have tried before. Maybe they were going to try. And maybe the social media video just came across wrong. And they said things that maybe they didn't mean. But the fact is that it ultimately led to the right thing happening. And this guy's a great guy, great doctor. It turns out that they do treat all the way into the foot. They do it all the time. And so we had a really great meeting of the minds and conversation. And I was very impressed.
I do also know there are days you struggle thinking that what impact are you having, and you do so much for everybody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Yep.
You do that. And we always want to remind you that your impact goes beyond what you can visibly see sometimes. It's and we're all a part of that. We got your back on that, but you just don't forget how much your voice makes an impact in saving life and limbs out there, and how much you do for so many, and your impact by that passion that you have. And yes, sometimes you can be curt, but that's what you need to be. You need to be upfront, and you need to have that ability to stir the waters sometimes.
Yep.
Because that's what it needs sometimes. We all know that sometimes a little revolution doesn't hurt. And
Thank
years
you,
of work.
Douglas.
So
And
remember
thank you,
that.
Charles. Yeah, no, sometimes it's hard. And there were a couple times where a couple have come up to me and they do a little doc-splaining or scolding of me for overstepping in certain ways. And, the thing is that, my chairman, said to me just yesterday, he says, Kim, you know what? Everyone knows who you are now. And you're making a difference. But you need to develop a thick skin. And you know how many times, and I appreciate all of you who are even listening that have allowed me to be human with you, that have allowed me to vent, to share probably more than I should about my experiences and what's going on in the reality, what's going on. But my whole thing is I'm transparent. I'm a real old school journalist at heart with high integrity. And I don't believe in holding back. I don't believe in lying to people. I really believe in being transparent and being who you are and speaking your truth and allowing yourself to just be vulnerable. Because it's in those moments that we can actually create the change that we want to see and actually create the family that I think that we all have here through this community.
Absolutely. I have a piece of
Kim.
paper with your autograph. I'm gonna keep it for the next 10 years and sell it in 10 years, because it'll be worth a lot of money.
Kim, you are
Hi.
known. Dr. Armstrong says hi, by the way. I saw him yesterday.
He was so upset. He was so upset that you texted me first. He was like, he beat me. I was going to text you.
But he tells all the people that are helping him out when they do procedures about you, and explains what you do. And they find it pretty interesting. They didn't know it existed. So he's a big advocate for all this also.
Yeah, he's such a good guy, isn't he? And I'm
Yeah.
so glad he loves you. And I love that he always, when I saw him in Washington, D.C., he
Yeah,
actually
said
was
that.
one of the proponents for me. And I don't know exactly how it went down, but I know it had to have been Dr. Armstrong and this other Dr. Eric Sizemski that fought for me to be at the table, to raise your voices at the table of the Vascular Leaders Forum. And it means the world to me that they did that.
Yeah.
But the fact that he remembers who you are, and I'm able to share with him how much you're walking. And I was joking with him. I said, that really speaks volumes, about Heinz, that he was upset that he had to put off walking his 5 miles that he was hoping to get a day for a few days so he can recover.
Yeah.
And I love that about you, that you just keep persevering and pushing yourself. And it's fun to see. I'd love to know what really motivates you, what keeps you going. I mean, because you go through a lot.
Well, I'm lucky though. I'm really lucky. I told them yesterday what they did for me, what my previous doctors did for me. I was very lucky, so I look at my disease a little differently than others because I got it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, I thank them every time I see them that they did what they did for me. And I have the time, so I walk.
I love it. I love it. I might tap into you because we're going to get a lot of signups for our walking program, and would love it if you would help participate to get on the phone with a few of them and help motivate them, and have them even join you on your walk and talk them through it.
Well, I did both sides, so I did have the claudication too, so I do know what it feels like.
Yep.
So,
and how being on the phone with them and talking them through that claudication would be great.
Yep. It was a thorn in my side, but I got through it.
And that's amazing. And we do have a question coming in from Opal Dancing. What about underweight people? Should we not be tested for prediabetes, insulin resistance, and other related issues? I don't care what weight you are. I think every single annual physical, you should actually get tested for prediabetes. And if you're prediabetes, it just takes one sugar molecule to scratch an artery and lead to plaque buildup. So don't let them brush you off as prediabetes and, whatever, sure, just start eating better. No, you better start taking that diet very seriously. And we even have our book. We have Food for Thought, which it has proven to be very popular at this conference. It's available on Amazon. Can't really see it on here, but it's called Food for Thought. You can look up peripheral artery disease on Amazon, and it's just $20. If you can't afford that, we have it free online. And it talks about even using Ceylon cinnamon, and there are clinical studies on Ceylon cinnamon, but you have to read the clinical studies and then make sure that you check with your doctor to see, if it's right for your situation. But guys, I hope you don't mind if I jump off for a second and run over and go grab some food before they close shop, and I'll come back if you're still, wanting to continue the conversation.
Go grab you something to eat, young lady.
Okay, you want to stay on?
Yeah, I'll be on for a few more minutes.
Okay.
If anybody wants to stay, otherwise I'm gonna fix me something to eat too.
Okay, well, I think it's probably a good time to even just jump off and end. If anyone has any questions, they can go ahead and email me at KYM at thewaytomyheart.org, at thewaytomyheart.org, all spelled out. You can also call our Lifesaver hotline, 415-320-7138, 415-320-7138. And PAD navigators are standing by, including myself and Douglas and a couple others. So just call anytime with any questions that you might have. And again, a big shout out to my producer, Colin, over in the KTRB studios, and also to Josh, who's producing our live stream and engaging our audience there. Thank you guys so much for all your support, and Heinz and Charles and Marcia for all joining us. And I think we had a few others that were joining us here and online. So thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you actually. When is our next broadcast? Is it on Tuesday? We're doing our very first What's Up Doc. And so it's at 1:30 Pacific time, 1:30 to 2:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30 Eastern time. We're going to do on Tuesday, we're going to do What's Up Doc. And so any questions you have for doctors, round them up and let's get them squared away, and we're going to get them answered for you on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, Douglas holds an amazing chat. Email Douglas, Douglas, Douglas at thewaytomyheart.org if you want to join those discussions. We don't make that link public, but he holds a conversation every Wednesday. And on Fridays, we are now doing our Friday foodie or food for thought or Patty's plate, whatever we're calling it. Foodie Friday.
Foodie Friday.
And I think we might have a professional chef who's going to come on Friday. So stay tuned for that. So that'll be exciting.
And starting in May, we're going to have Marcia on Mondays do a Tai Chi class to help us just do something different and learn.
Get our mindset.
Yep.
We're calling it Moving Monday.
So we have a lot of great stuff going on.
Yep. Thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate you. I love you, Douglas. Love you all. And I'll talk to you very soon.
All right. Be good.